We had a team go to Zimbabwe, as most of you know, and this is kind of a little report of what. You guys all comfortable? You look good, man. This is church attire in Zimbabwe. Everybody thought there was a funeral or something happening today because all the guys are wearing ties and the women are all dressed up. It's a very formal culture, and you wear ties to school and to church for sure. We'd see people out walking in the cornfield. Well, they don't have corn. Well, they do have corn. Anyway, we didn't see cornfields. In the fields, in the dirt, wearing suits, right? I mean, it's just kind of how they are. And so we decided we'd wear our Zimbabwe attire. It was 2-3 weeks ago today we were doing the revival. Time flies, and it was a pretty cool experience. We'll talk about the experiences. Here's the deal. Today we're just going to talk about what did God do. What's our verse? Acts, when Paul and Barnabas came back from the missionary journey, it says from there they sailed to Antioch, so they went back home to the ascending church where they'd been commended by the grace of God for the work that they had. Can't see it all over there, for the work that they had fulfilled. When they arrived, they gathered the church together, they declared all that God had done with them and how he had opened the door of faith to the Gentiles. That's what we want to do today. It's just we're each going to share very briefly about some things we saw God do, maybe in our lives, maybe in the lives of people around us, but God did some stuff through this missionary journey that we went on, and we've come back to report to the church. From my perspective, I always, when anything we do, whether it's vacation, Bible school, any ministry we have, the stuff we do, I'm always kind of asking the question, is it worth it, right? Is it worth the effort? Is it worth the money? Is it worth everything we put into whatever it is we do? Because sometimes churches will hang on to things just because, and sometimes we just need to cut things and get rid of it because we're not really doing it for other than because. And so that's usually in the back of my mind. So I had that question in the back of my mind going into this trip. Like, we spent a lot of money. We send a lot of money over there every year, every month to support children, to support the ministries there. As a team, we gathered a lot of money to go over there. It's like, was it worth it? And so that's really the question I had, because we plan to do this every year that people want to go. We'll send a crew. And I want to make sure it's worth it. And so that's the question I had in my mind. It was answered fairly quickly for me through a guy named Cephas, and actually I'm going to talk about that in a couple minutes, because first I want to talk about, we're going to let Nicole give her story. I think I'm number 2 on the list, right? I'm jumping ahead of myself. Yeah, Nicole. So I asked everybody the first night to pray for 2 things. One, what does God want us to do here? What does God want me to do personally? It might be talk to a child, it might be talk to an individual, it might be help them with crafts, whatever it is. What does God want me to do? And secondly, what does God want me to do after here? You know, what's God leading me as a person to do because of this trip? It might be something associated with Africa or Zimbabwe. It might be something else. And it was kind of cool to see some of those questions answered, those prayers answered. And Nicole has a pretty good answer to the question. We'll let her start. But she's not here today. She's in Chicago, but she has a video for us.
Hi, Pathway. Sorry I couldn't be there today. I'm actually in Chicago where this entire mission trip began. So it's bringing back a lot of memories and feelings from that whole trip. So I'm excited to be talking to you guys about it today. Dan asked us how we felt God or saw God moving through us and through the people there when we were in Zimbabwe. And there are so many different ways that I saw and felt him. But what I wanted to talk about today was kind of a personal way that I saw and felt him in my own self and in my decisions in life. Ever since I was really little, I wanted to be a doctor. And if none of you guys know, I am studying to be a doctor right now in the University of Iowa. I'm a sophomore there. But from the last few years, I just have kind of lost my will and excitement, I guess, about becoming a doctor. There's a lot of years you have to put in, about 8 years of schooling, and then I wanted to be a surgeon, so about 5 to 7 years after that of residency, and it's just a lot of questions about my life and how that all would fit in, and I've kind of been thinking that I didn't want to become a doctor anymore. And so I went into this trip, you know, kind of with that mindset, but I'm still in the pre-med program, and in order to make things a little bit easier to understand and shorter conversations, I told everyone that I was studying to be a doctor when they asked me what my profession was. And right then, I was so surprised by their excitement about that one little statement. I had people throughout the week coming up to me and calling me doctor because I had said that, asking me about their own health problems, telling me about health problems that are really prominent in Zimbabwe, such as HIV and AIDS, and they were saying there was lots of cancer in women in the rural areas. I had people coming up to me and asking me multiple times about if I could come back when I do become a doctor and help them out. I had a couple headmasters at the schools come up to me and say that I was an inspiration to the kids just because I had said I was a doctor, and that they needed more people like that in the area. And so I kind of sat back and I was like, yes, like being a doctor is something that's needed, but I didn't expect, I guess, to get so much feedback from the people there about it. And so I kind of thought that might be God saying something to me, and I spoke about that a little bit with the mission trip there. And then as the week continued, we actually ended up going to a clinic that was being built there. And it wasn't open yet, and it was just kind of the structure of it. But for a second there, I had an image pop up in my head of me there helping people in the clinic, and I was like, where did this come from? It's kind of a random image showing up in my head, and I realized, maybe that was God as well, saying, Nicole, this is where I want you, and this is where you need to be. And so I guess throughout this entire mission trip, I really felt that God has been showing me where He wants me in my future, and wants me helping countries that are in the same economic state as Zimbabwe and with health and different things like that. So I loved this trip, and I really hope that we can see some more people on it next year and see how God can move through them as well. Thanks.
The pictures didn't show up, did it? I gave you the wrong video. I inserted some photos of the clinic, and anyway, that's on me. Tell Nicole I apologize. So I had, like I said, I'm always questioning, and the question that I got was answered fairly quickly through this guy in the pictures, not Steve.
I answered questions.
He answered questions too. But Cephas is the guy, and he's interpreting for Steve as he's preaching, and he's here at the school talking. And I got to know Cephas quite a bit. He grew up in the ministry there as a child, is when he first came to Christ. And here's the deal. His family has a history, generational history of mysticism, ancestral worship, a lot of demonic activity. His mom was like a medium. I mean, it was like leaders in that type of environment. That's the environment he was growing up into. He would probably become kind of a village healer in his adulthood if he followed the family line. But as a child, some white missionaries came to his village and did a revival. And just out of curiosity, he said he just wanted to see, like, what do these white people look like and sound like, and what are they all about? And so he went to this revival, and he heard these white people talk about a God that loves him. And he heard these white missionaries talk about how they loved him. And he couldn't let that go. He went back home and he thought about it, and he finally went back to this church, ultimately gave his life to Christ, grew up in Jesus, and now today, because of this ministry that we're a part of, is Hippo Valley Christian Mission, that has a number of churches, and they do the revivals like we just did and that kind of thing. He now is over, they have 26 or 27 schools. He's over all the schools. He's like a mentor to the pastors there. He's a pastor himself of a church there. He's very highly connected in leading the next generation to Christ, in serving through leading the preachers and the patrons. They're called the Living Proof. For those of you who sponsor children, the patrons are over the Living Proof clubs in the schools. Very, very, very big deal. And it's because some white missionaries showed up and it intrigued him enough to go. That was the spark that led him to Jesus, that then led to the rest of it. And so that answered in me, you know what, it is worth it. It was worth the effort we had going there. It's worth the effort we'll have going there again, because we saw firsthand the attraction of just being white people in southern Zimbabwe. It is, I mean, maybe some of the stories will show that, we'll relay that. They came to us in flocks. We literally touched thousands of children while we were there, in the short time we were there. And who knows who the next Cephas is going to be, you know. That was just huge confirmation for me to say, yeah, this truly is valuable. We met another young man that has grown up through the orphanage and now is a pastor and was one of our guys showing us around. I mean, there's some cool stories you'll hear. That's all I'm going to talk about. I'm going to pass it on to you guys, and I'm excited to hear your stories. So tonight we'll give the bigger picture and more details if you have questions and stuff too.
So this picture is the first sunset that we saw in Zimbabwe. And I'm sorry, I'm very weepy today. And I think it's just because sometimes I don't know how to express what I'm feeling. And this trip was just awesome, just doesn't describe it well enough. I was in the back of a truck. For a time, Gail and I were back there, and then Angela and I bonded for quite a few hours in the back of this truck, looking at suitcases. But this sunset spoke to me, and I shared later in a devotion that God had asked me, "What now?" I have brought you here. I have brought the team here to do all of this, to accomplish so much. What now? When you get back home, what's going to happen? And that's something I've been praying about. And I hope that as you listen to the stories today, and tonight, if you come tonight, that you will listen to God tugging on your heart, because I know that there is so much more that we can accomplish here and in Zimbabwe. The next picture is a picture of Ruth. We started sponsoring her a year or so ago, a little more than a year. And I've been writing to Ruth, and to meet her was incredible. I wish I had had more time to talk with her, but to actually see that my money is going to something good, it just moves me. I was so moved that while I was there, I actually reached out to Brad and said, "We need to sponsor another one." So the next picture is of Amanda. And I gave up my $25 a month Starbucks habit so that I can sponsor Amanda. That's how moved I was. The next picture is a picture of Ashid. My son also sponsors a first grader, and this is him. We found out when we were there that he has a twin who is also a part of the Living Proof program. And I met his mom. Now, Ashid's mom speaks zero English, but she kept saying over and over again, "Thank you." All she kept saying was, "Thank you, thank you, thank you." So for me, I would go again. I would certainly go again.
Since I started the Bible Study Detention Center, I ran across, reading Matthew, kind of became one of my life verses. It's Matthew 25:35. And I just summarize it as doing Jesus stuff. And it says, "For when I was hungry, you gave me something to eat. When I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. When I was a stranger, you invited me in. When I was naked, you clothed me. When I was in prison, you visited me." And it's just doing the little stuff for Jesus. And after I did my sermon, my devotion for the kids, the only thing I had left to do is just go be with the kids. I'd shake their hands, take their pictures. I got mobbed several times, taking hundreds of pictures of kids. They just loved it. And I just think just being there for them. And like Cindy says, what's next? And then I found out I get to change jobs. Now I get to be a teacher, and so I got more kids to be involved with. And then what was interesting is when I did my sermon, I asked God, next picture please, make sure there's somebody there that needs to open the gift I get when you saw my sermon, a little box. And it was the kid there that he opened it for me. Yeah, but I wanted to keep the box because it was kind of a neat souvenir. And so I finished my sermon, and Jesus says, give him the box. Okay, fine. I guess I have to make myself another box. So I gave him the box, and he came up afterwards and said, hey, is this really, I can keep it? Yeah, it's yours. Jesus told me to give it to you. And I didn't think anything of it. I was basically done. And that's when I started just being with the kids. And it was one of the nights we're doing the reviews, and after went to the children's village or the orphanage, one of the other ladies was talking to a kid and asked, anything special happened? He goes, yeah, that guy with the box. He goes, yeah, Dan. He goes, yeah. He wants me to he realized I need to follow Jesus. And he goes, wow. It was just incredible that I touched one kid. And it was kind of hard to read an audience because they're very stoic like us. We don't get excited. But they get excited when they sing and dance, which we don't hear. But you're still tough to read. But I just kind of remember I just need to keep doing Jesus stuff without qualifications. Thanks.
I noticed on the way to church this morning, there's probably half dozen people walking along 70th Street on the nice bike trail. They had their $100 pair of tennis shoes on and their dry fit shirts and silky shorts and carrying the water bottles or walking the dog, and just your typical picture of suburbia. You're going to see a lot of pictures here from me or from everybody else of smiling kids. You're going to see some videos of dancing and joyful. And my section here is about joy and how I saw joy there. What you're not going to see and what was really there as well is a country that is desperate and hopeless. There are people living in grass huts, literal thatch roofs, mud walls. They have all the excuses in the world to be angry with God. And I think some of them probably are, or don't know God, certainly don't know who to be angry at. But you're going to see how the Holy Spirit has touched a lot of these kids in particular in our videos and pictures, but it's adults as well. Custis and I, we have to call him Custis because there's two Dans. It's Big Dan, Little Dan, and that gets a little weird too. So, so Custis and I, one afternoon during the revival, we were sitting in this room because the way the schedules work in this culture is there are no schedules that you can plan on. And so we were supposed to speak or something in a program, and it didn't happen. So we were just sitting there basically in an empty room. And there's a couple kids in there. They were dinking around on a keyboard, and pretty soon a couple more show up, and they start playing some songs, and a couple more show up, and they start singing and dancing, and a couple more show up. And this went on for, I don't know, a couple hours, it felt at least. And we being Dan and I, couldn't remove ourselves from this room because the singing and dancing and praising that these kids were doing, and I say kids, they're all ages. They were mainly middle school, high school age kids probably, but under no prompting by anyone, they just started singing and praising God. And the joy that they had and the joy that you see in some of these kids is just, it's the Holy Spirit working on them. And you can see the effects of us being there. I'm kind of a numbers guy, and a trip like this for 3 family members hits my pocketbook pretty heavy, probably heavier than most. And you start thinking, all right, for a lot of money, you can do a lot of stuff in a country like Zimbabwe. The lady, for example, that was our housekeeper made, I think, $180 a month. 5 days a week, 6 days a week, all day long. That was her salary. So you can imagine you throw $10 here, $20 there, and that's big money to a lot of those people. But the impact that we had, I think Dan touched on it right away, Big Dan. um, that Cephas was saying that the white people cared. And the minute we got off the plane and we're trekking down from Harare to Shrewsbury, it was dark and we were tired, and we stopped for supper, and we pile out of our vehicles, and there's not a white person within 200 miles probably, and you could tell by the reaction of all these folks that were just hanging out at this restaurant area. And there was this little girl that was standing in line ahead of us, and she turned around and she saw these 10 white people behind her, and her eyes went, that big around. She started smiling, and then she sheepishly picked up her phone and wanted to take a picture of us. And Cindy, God bless her, she runs over there and takes a selfie with her, and boy, you would have thought she just gave her the best Christmas present in the world. And it was kind of right then that just set the tone of the impact we were going to have just by being there. And it's really tough to put a dollar price tag on that kind of an impact. If you want to roll the video, Joel, this is at a school. So that was just a quick, this was a school at the top of a mountain up in the hills, very, very, very poor area. The teachers were saying these kids walk, some of them 6 miles one way to school. Half of them don't even have shoes. You saw them wearing parkas. It's cold. It's cold there, but they didn't have shoes. I mean, it's truly a situation where it could be desperate. It could be, very depressing, but you could see in that video, and you'll see more accounts, that it was anything but depressing, and they were filled with joy.
So I'd have to say one of my favorite parts about the trip was the opportunity to hear everybody debrief each night. That was in contrast to last year when we went. We never really sat down as a group and discussed how do you see him working today specifically? How do you see him working throughout the trip? It's kind of interesting. So that was part of my favorite memories from this trip, was just hearing the impact that everybody was getting from each activity, each thing we planned, and getting to hear some of the things that I didn't personally experience through other people, and me getting to share some of my experiences that other people didn't necessarily hear for themselves. So when Dad and I came on this trip, we came into with a unique experience of having been there before, which last time we came home and we hadn't debriefed as a group, so we sat down and we kind of talked about, was this really what we intended? Was it helpful to the people there, not just us? It was clearly important to us, but was it actually a genuine impact to the people there too? And we decided it really was, and we felt obviously it was a big enough impact to bring along a bunch of people that were interested to go this year. And we decided that this was kind of our opportunity to have a long-term mission without having to drop everything and be there full-time. We could do short-term missions, but consistently. So throughout the year, we would use Facebook Messenger mostly to keep in contact with several people in Zimbabwe. And honestly, it wasn't hard. They were the ones reaching out, yeah. So it was really fun to keep in communication throughout the year and then go back and see them. So I just wanted to share a couple of the unique experiences we had of having been there once before and kind of built those relationships. First, the whole revival was made possible because we kept in contact with the preacher at the church we did the revival at, and his name is Emmanuel. And we would message him on Facebook a lot, and it would always be like, hello, greetings to you and your whole family. Like, he'd never met my mom, but it was always, hi, Miss Cheryl. It was really cool. And so there was a connection there, and so we could build off of that and kind of be like, what would really be beneficial at your church? How can we genuinely make an impact? And I thought it was cool to be more effective this year, even more so than last year, because we had that relationship that wasn't there last time. Additionally, throughout the week, there were some funny stories that friends that I had made last year would come over to the house at night and kind of just chat, and it would be a fun reunion. And one time specifically, we were downtown getting chicken for lunch, and someone, were they coming up from a car or something? She hopped out of a car in the middle of town and was like, Shanna! And was running towards Danielle, because we're twins there. And I hear Steve come around the corner. I'm in the chicken place. He's like, Shanna, you have a friend? Oh, okay. And I went out there, and she was like, Shanna, oh my goodness, I missed you. And she had no idea I was coming to Zimbabwe. We hadn't talked for a year. I didn't even remember her name. It was really embarrassing for me. But I just thought that was crazy that we, for real, apparently made quite an impact. She was a translator at one of the VBSs last year. And, I mean, we didn't even keep the communication throughout the year, but it was still such an impact from last year, apparently. And I thought that was interesting and unique. Another moment like that was we were at Chamburukira Primary. That's where a lot of us have our sponsored kids in Living Proof. And out of the full crowd of students at the school, one little boy stood up, directly pointed at my dad and was like, that's Dan Hudson. Dan Hudson. He helped at VBS last year. And he was like a helper for crafts. Really, I mean, significant, of course, but but like he wasn't speaking or anything. It was kind of a supplemental role. And he remembered by name this white guy that he met a year ago. I thought that was really spoke to how much is an impact from a 3-hour VBS last year. I thought that was crazy. Specifically at that school, he did keep in contact with the patron, the Living Proof patron. His name is Innocent, and he's in this picture. Oh, sorry, the last picture. He was in the last picture. His name is Innocent. And they kept in contact, and throughout the year, Dad was trying to kind of figure out ways, like, what can we do when we come to help you? Because we have a relationship now. And it kind of turned out that some of the he didn't have a lot of access to different materials to work with his sermons. And Dad offered to give some of his old sermons to him, and he was in shock. He said, I asked for the response. I don't remember what it is, but it was something like, this is the best gift I've ever received. It's crazy. And he shared some of his takeaways from last year. Is interesting. This is what he messaged my dad. He said, that's not the right one. I love communicating with you for many reasons. Among them, number 1, you're a wonderful team. You tell us a lot about Christ in a short time when you came here. 2, you showed us love that I read about from the Bible. And 3, you sacrificed your time, comfort, and your homes and resources to visit us here. And I thought that was cool. I mean, that wasn't even towards me, but hearing about it was cool to hear that it was a genuine impact, and like it's going to continue to impact not only him, but a lot of the people that hear his sermons. There'll be new, fresh material. That's a weekly revival from someone that lives there. I thought that was going to make a cool long-term impact. And then lastly, in the next pictures shows kids from the orphanage that we visited. And I don't know why, but I was suddenly kind of nervous to strike up a conversation with the kids there. I have no idea why these nerves came over me. And then I pulled out my phone and realized, like last year, what we bonded over, what doesn't need language to communicate, was just we took some pictures and had some fun last year. So I pulled out those pictures and found those kids again, and I went and I showed them this picture, and they looked up at me like, that's you. Like, you came back. That's crazy. And from there, like, that sparked a lot of new conversation that probably wouldn't have happened with someone that was just there for an evening, you know? They specifically said, like, you came back. Like, they were so surprised. It never happens. I thought that was really, really cool. The boy in the bright green jacket, he was the one that opened up that night and was like, yeah, I went to that revival, and the man with the box, which was Custis, he's like, yeah, he made me want to follow Jesus. It's like, that's amazing. And I don't know that I would have heard that if he only thought that we were there for a minute, and then just left. So I just thought it was so cool to see that there really was an impact last year, and there's more impact this year that we don't even know about. It's cool to see that it wasn't just a one and done kind of thing. It's long term. We'll keep coming back as long as we have interest.
For me, I just felt like God was really just calling us to love on these people, and even people that we've never met before. And so it was really great to experience it when we were there. So, and the first pictures here are at VBS, and Shanna did a great job leading a lesson. The series was called Hello, My Name is Jesus, and in the top left there, she had everyone fill out name tag, and they put their names on there. And I don't know if it was a surprise to you, but to me it was a surprise how special they thought that was, and it allowed us to be able to say their name, because a lot of times you'd say, ask them what their name is, and first of all, they talk really quiet, and then their names are really hard, unless it's something like Ruth. So it was either Ruth or a name you couldn't really pronounce, but if you could read it, you could say it, or you could try and say it, and they'd laugh, and it would start a conversation. But I just think it really made them feel special, so special that they wore those name tags. Okay, so some of these pictures are from that first day, and you can see a lot of the kids have the name tags on, and they wore them all day long. And then it was really cool because as new kids came, because this whole VBS just grew as the day went on, more kids would come up and say, hey, I don't have a name tag, I don't have a name tag. And so we went through the whole box of name tags. It was just crazy. I don't know how many we brought. But so it was just great to know them and know their name and be able to look them in their eyes and just, say their name and show them love. So the next slide, that was the second day. And what was crazy is, and I don't have a very good picture, so I just tried to circle there, but they still had their name tags on. So they maybe came in different clothes, but they still had the name tag. And it might have been wrinkled and bent up, but to me that just showed how much they valued that we could know their name. And then the second day was a little colder than the first, so a lot of them had coats on and stuff, or what they thought was cold. It was probably in the mid 60s, upper 60s. But anyway, so we just know that God knows all of us. And we didn't know them before, but now we know them, and we know them by name. But God knows them by name all the time. The next slide, the other thing that really impacted me was when we went to the orphanage. And, as we all know, we're called to spend time with the orphans and widows. And so Cindy did a great job and brought a game. And we just spent time playing this game with them, which they just loved. These kids, as Steve said, most of them are barefoot or in socks or in shoes that have big holes in them, like I could see their toes. And but it was really fun just spending time with them and playing this game. But what really impacted me in the next slide is when we gave them the shoes. And, Pathway, we took a ton of shoes over there. For me personally, I took some tennis shoes over there that I got from some friends, and these are her extra shoes. These 4 in the picture, and she's going to throw them away, or they're in the back of her closet. And if you run or walk a lot, you will change your shoes every so often, even though they still look nice. So I took them there for her, and the kids they were so excited, and you just, again, thought they would have won the lottery or something. So in the other picture, you can see them in socks and barefoot, and they were so excited to get the shoes, not only from the ones that Pathway took, but the other ones. So there's a bunch of pictures of them in their shoes, very excited. And so I know personally for me, I kind of went into that a little nonchalant and didn't try very hard to gather those tennis shoes for my friends, and I will not do that again. I will be much more of an advocate and gathering those and taking them over there because they just really valued those.
I just want to kind of reiterate the impact of the VBS and revival that we did. The top picture you can see up there shows the first day, that was Saturday morning. We had met Friday night. Probably that many people showed up. We were a little discouraged, maybe a little nervous. Saturday morning, this is how kind of the crowd started. And then by Sunday evening, that's the same room, the bottom picture, that there's literally not another space for someone to be in there. In fact, extra people were outside of the building. We didn't get to be in there. I mean, it was packed. We ended up being the talk of the town. That's from Emmanuel, is what he told us. Towns, surrounding towns were hearing word of white people being here and revivals and VBS happening. And so through this, minimal sort of work we were able to do in this one trip, we were able to make this long impact. They've made new connections. New kids have started coming to this church. They're actually forming a new children's ministry there. And more kids who come, their parents start to come. That's changing a town. It can change a nation. So that was pretty incredible. And then the other major thing I wanted to hit on was Zebedee. He's actually the leader of Hippo Valley Christian Mission in the African side of it in Zimbabwe. And we all invited all of the leaders and everybody in Zimbabwe over the last night we were there and kind of served them, gave them a meal. And we were all gathering towards the end of the night and just kind of debriefing again and talking. And I was secretly recording a lot of conversations, so if you want to hear some fun stories, come find me. But without him knowing, hopefully it's okay, Zebedee, I recorded this really impactful thing he had said. He's like this world-renowned missionary. He speaks at ICOM, the International Conference of Missions, and he basically, it's sometimes kind of hard to understand. So basically he says, we hit him like a ton of bricks. His neighbor that he's lived next to for years was at this revival, and he had never been to church in his life. He's like, you guys, you're making an impact. He speaks around the entire world and hadn't actually spoken to his neighbor, and his neighbor showed up. So I'm going to let him actually tell the story.
I failed. If I ever failed in my life, it became obvious on Sunday. The man I stayed with, who was my next door neighbor for years, I never went to church. I never talked to him because he was in the next band. Never talked to him. You guys just hit me in the face because he was there with his new wife. Maybe it's the new wife. It's the new wife. Because he has just... That was his first time. He had a divorce from his boyhood wife. He is a grandpa with grandma. They divorced and took this new wife. First time in his life, or in his, at least of what I know, he came to church on Sunday. All because of you guys. You might not know, but you have touched lives. So I hope and pray that the partnership goes on.
He said, I hope and pray that the partnership goes on. So usually that kind of concludes what we were talking about. Usually our band comes back up to play, but we're going to let our friends from Africa kind of wrap this all up for us. So what you're going to see in this video is kind of a compilation of clips. Some were the spontaneous worship that Steve had brought up. Some were at the schools. Some is in that church there. So it's kind of hard to look at a video and be like, oh, that's really nice. So I'm going to try and kind of set the scene. So close your eyes. I'm taking you to Zimbabwe right now. You can go for real next year. Okay. It's 68 degrees out, and it's overcast. There is a slight breeze in the air, and you actually feel quite chilly. You just walked along the dirt road to meet with your church family, and you're now in a concrete building. The walls, the ceilings, the floors are all concrete with the windows built in. You can hear hints of music in the background of the town in Sharadzi. You can smell a faint aroma of sugar from the sugarcane fields in the air. The children are starting to come in now, they're gathering. And the adults are starting to come in slowly. The children start singing, and then the worship begins.
Hey!